Order. Order. The Committee of the Whole on Supply reports.
That the Committee of the Whole on Supply has met and made some progress and begs leave to sit again.
I recognize the Honourable Government House Leader.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. Could you please call bills for second reading?
Bills for second reading. I recognize the Honourable Government House Leader.
Why, thank you, Madam Speaker. Would you please call Bill 196, the Community College Act?
Bill 196, the Community College Act. I recognize the Honourable Minister of Labour Skills and Immigration.
Speaker, I move that Bill 196, an act to amend the Community Colleges Act, now be read a second time. This bill supports the creation of a new Institute of Skilled Trades within NSCC. It also updates the Act to reflect the transfer responsibility to the Minister of Labour, Skills and Immigration, and it modernizes certain governance provisions to support stronger coordination across the system. And I look forward to hearing from my colleagues on this legislation.
I recognize the Honourable Member of Sackville-Cobequid.
There you go. That's a first speaker. I won't take the full hour here. That's not the purpose of these opening remarks, but one of the things I like to do when there's a bill in my portfolio, I like to talk through what I understand the bill will accomplish if it's passed as constituted on the page. So I think it's helpful to stakeholders and folks watching at home to understand exactly what the bill would accomplish. And then it's an opportunity for us to sort of sit with the ramifications of it as written, potentially provide the minister with an opportunity to respond later on with further information to clarify the purpose, intent of the bill, and perhaps identify areas where amendments might strengthen the legislation. So with that in mind, Speaker, I'll just get underway. I understand the bill to achieve a number of things. Clause 3 makes the president of the Nova Scotia Community College an appointment of the governor and council. For the uninitiated, it means that this is a role that would be appointed by the Premier of Nova Scotia. We've had a little bit of back and forth with department staff, and we understand that this appointment is intended to be subject to the existing agencies, boards, and commissions process. Beyond that, it establishes or allows the board or empowers the board, the current board of the Nova Scotia Community College, to establish an Institute of Skilled Trades and an Institute of Skilled Trades Council. You will know that, most of you will know that I'm a classroom teacher. I've spent my life in schools. It's not common in Nova Scotia because most of our schools aren't large enough for this model. But I am familiar with public schools of a significant size, usually 5,000 or more, where it's not uncommon for students to be organized into academies. So it's not a separate building, but really it kind of functions like a school within a school, where there is a population of the students whose studies kind of align with a particular focus. So one very large school might have an academy that's sort of fine arts related, another that's kind of STEM related, et cetera, et cetera. So I understand the creation of the Institute of Skilled Trades would be to create sort of a school within NSCC. Right now, for Nova Scotians, what is NSCC? Way back when, there were a whole bunch of different colleges that prepared people for vocational and trades-related education. In the 90s, they were all brought under one umbrella via the NSCC Act, so that all of those colleges on those campuses right across Nova Scotia functioned as one entity under one administration to support the delivery and enhance access to trades and vocational education. So this would sort of modify how NSCC works currently. I think it's also worthy of note to just clarify that the Nova Scotia Community College, while a lot of people tend to think of it as, well, that's where you go to learn to be a tradesperson. It's not the only pathway towards certification as a tradesperson. It's an important one, unquestionably, and it does fine work in that regard. But NSCC is not only, for lack of a better term, a purveyor of trades-based education. It also prepares students for a number of other academic and post-secondary destinations. It has wonderful programs in the field of broadcasting or broadcast journalism, audio recording and production. There are a number of entry-level healthcare roles that you can get certified to be qualified to fulfill in our healthcare systems through NSCC. So there's a broad scope of programming that NSCC provides. Right now, trades-based education is provided alongside or parallel to non-trades-based education under the purview of the Board of Directors. This legislation creates a school within the school. And so the Skilled Trades Institute, as I understand it, would be responsible for the delivery of trades-based education under the NSCC milieu. And it creates a sub-body of the board to oversee and administer that education. So this act later on also provides the board with the ability to empower this council. So this is sort of like a sub-board of governors. There is some thought given to who this council would be, how many people, who would sit on it for how long. Those are all what I understand Clause 6C. As proposed in legislation, I understand that or read that to be a list of regulations that would be developed that would define the composition and the constitution of that group, its purpose, who sits on it for how long, who will be qualified. So I see the minister nodding. So I think I'm picking up what the legislation is laying down fairly. I'm not trying to criticize here. I'm just trying to outline what I understand the bill to accomplish. I do want to highlight that in establishing this council, this sort of sub-board of governors that would oversee all trades-related education at NSCC, its initial iteration. So this is a new body. It has no members, and there's nobody appointed yet to serve. The ability to staff this council, and I understand the purpose of this council is for there to be a more direct, robust relationship with the skilled trade sector and the construction sector in the delivery of trades-based education at NSCC. I'm making the guess or the leap that one of the reasons this legislation is coming forward is there is a perspective that perhaps that NSCC is not as responsive to the needs of the sector as perhaps it should be in the delivery of trades education, and this is an attempt to remedy that and make it more nimble and responsive to industry needs. This first iteration of the Skilled Trades Council will be appointed by the Minister of Labour, Skills and Immigration. Those appointments are not subject to the ABC's process. And I note for the House that in appointing these members, it is the minister alone that determines the terms, which I understand to be, that means term limits, how long they would serve in this group. Those term limits are the sole discretion of the minister who makes those initial appointments. I'm certainly not suggesting that the minister has 25 buddies that he wants to hand lifetime appointments to on this new Skilled Trades Council. I'm simply drawing attention to the House that the language as currently constituted allows the minister, the potential for the minister, to stack this council with people whose terms would be indefinite. So there's no limitation. It doesn't say the minister shall appoint the initial members and their term shall be such and such, a limited length that would allow the ABC's process to figure out who would sit on that board in the longer term. And that's a potential issue that I think, you know, if you give somebody the power to do something, I think you have to sit with whether or not that's what's intended. So whether or not the minister intends to give people lifetime appointments to the Skilled Trades Council, the door is certainly open to that in the way that the language is currently constituted. Aside from that, I don't have a whole lot of things to point out about how this bill functions or what it would change. And so now I want to shift to discussing, I guess, some questions and thoughts that arise out of my understanding of the bill. And I want to go back to my initial remarks about NSCC and its history. So right now, NSCC is a jewel in the crown of post-secondary education in our province. There are people that would suggest that anything less than university is looked at as lesser than in our province. And I would argue, since NSCC has formed, it has done brilliant work in providing quality vocational, skilled trades in other education to students who attend. Moreover, I would say that Nova Scotia Community College is recognized by the people of Nova Scotia and students outside of Nova Scotia as a high-value location to get an education. Not only are you going to get some kind of piece of paper upon graduation from NSCC that puts you in a great position to find meaningful, good-paying employment in whatever sector you happen to have trained in, you are not going to pay crazy fees to go to NSCC. Tuition is affordable and accessible, and of course campuses are distributed geographically throughout the province, which makes it possible for students to access opportunities to obtain well-paying employment through industry-relevant training, oftentimes in their own backyard, so they don't have to move away from home. These are net positives of the college, and they're worthy of a tip of the cap. The faculty and professional support that deliver learning to students at NSCC do world-class work, and that's worthy of mention here. One of the things I wonder about, one other thing I want to say before I make my next comment. I also understand that Nova Scotia is in a place where we are facing a shortage of skilled tradespeople for a number of reasons. The folks that we have working in the skilled trades, highly qualified, do immensely, admirable work across dozens and dozens of different kinds of trades and help keep our province ticking, moving, and building towards progress. NSCC helps to meet that need by graduating students. There is a focus on a shortage, and I understand that we need to turn our minds to how can we graduate more qualified people to meet this need at a time of shortage. In the short term, I understand this move and the motivation behind it. That said, I do want to sit with a minute for a potential impact of this legislation. Right now, NSCC delivers trades education right alongside lots of other forms of education. And trades education is not lesser than or greater than the other kinds of learning that are delivered by NSCC. One of the concerns I have about changing the governance structure of NSCC is, in effect, the Board of Governors that technically has responsibility for the whole college is being told, you are now going to delegate oversight and administration for trades-based education to this other group that you create, and then it's their stuff, it's no longer yours. Nothing in this legislation makes clear that the Skilled Trades Council is answerable to the board. I'm not saying, in practice it may work out that way, but it's not enshrined in legislation that the Skilled Trades Council is answerable to and accountable to the board. In the absence of that language, there's a possibility that over time, once we set this in motion, we know that government is motivated to fund initiatives that help us train more skilled tradespeople, and we understand why. That's a worthy objective, and it's something that every government in Canada is frankly responsive to in this time. Skilled trade shortages are not unique to Nova Scotia. And so I understand the government this is their attempt or an attempt to address that need. However, we also know that this legislation comes at a time that in a budget that's getting lots of criticism about reductions in spending and cuts, we know that NSCC as an institution is looking at a 3% reduction in operating budget for at least the medium-term future. At the same time, the government is going to pump lots of money and resources into trades-based education at NSCC. The funding that NSCC gets to deliver a lot of other world-class training is shrinking by the year. And that creates a dynamic where all of a sudden, what happens when, because of resources that are shrinking, are growing smaller over time, do those programs face the chopping block by attrition over time? And when those programs can no longer be deemed to be deliverable because they're too costly or enrollment is too low, have we artificially created conditions that drive those programs to private colleges who charge significantly more tuition to get the same training? I'm not saying this is the intent. I am trying to draw to attention of the House a potential outcome of this legislation if we pass it as is. By hiving off the governance of skills-based training from the rest of the operation of the university, there's a potential that we create a part of the college that gets lots of resources and lots of government support, and then the rest of the institution is left to fend for itself. And the governors that are responsible for that, they have limited ability to ensure the long-term viability of other programs that remain immensely valuable to Nova Scotia families and students and other industries, even though they exist outside the trades. So I draw to attention of the House that the way that these governance changes are structured expose us to some risk. If we consider this legislation in isolation from budget direction for this year and for the foreseeable future, and how that will impact funding for training and access to programming outside skilled trades via the college. The other thing that I would simply draw attention to, and this is back in Clause 3, my initial comment, that the hiring of the college, the Nova Scotia Community College, becomes a governor and council appointment. And I rightly noted that it's our understanding from department staff that this appointment would follow the ABC's process, and it would come before the HR committee of the House for, for approval, if you will. Nonetheless, certain government appointments as of late have come under scrutiny because of public perception that senior leaders in this government make appointments based on political patronage and proximity to key government leaders. I'm not here to debate those appointments. I am drawing attention to this clause and the potential for the appointment of a president under the language that's passed to be subject to the same scrutiny. This enables the Premier to say, hey, pal, you spent 20 years in the trades, you've been a faithful friend, you should be the new president of NSCC. That recommendation goes forward to the House, and you can say, well, there's an opportunity there for people to draw attention to whether or not this appointment was done in a way that's on the up and up. except that, as a current member of the House HR Committee, that committee has a majority government component. We lived in an environment of whipped politics. And if members of the committee receive direction from the Premier's office that this appointment is going to go through as is, no amount of reasoned debate in that committee is going to stop a patronage appointment from occurring through the ABC's process. So, do I believe that this is the intent of the legislation? That's not what I'm saying. So before anybody gets neck problems from shaking their head in vigorous disagreement, that's not where I'm going. I'm simply pointing out that the language as currently constituted leaves open that possibility. And I believe, whereas NSCC is a Canadian leader, an international leader in the delivery of vocational trades and other post-secondary training, it's in the public interest that NSCC be free from any perception that the government of Nova Scotia, or whoever the premier of the day is, exerts political control over how the institution operates, what its priorities are, who gets hired, and what gets funded by the board of directors or people that they can appoint or recommend to the Skilled Trades Council. I don't think it serves NSCC well. I don't think it serves the province well. And I think thoughtful legislation could turn its mind to perhaps a different mechanism to the appointment of a president than is currently present in the legislation. But I do raise the flag that the language in the proposed legislation leaves significant potential for there to be perception and of patronage and, the functional ability for a patronage appointment to occur in the role of the president of the college. As I have indicated, I think I understand that the function of the legislation well. I do want to look very closely here at the end under the proposed Article 6C, the addition and respects the composition of an Institute of Skilled Trades Council. I do want to tip the cap. I do recognize that the minister in proposing this legislation has not been opaque about who's going to be on this council and who's qualified. So I do recognize that regulations that are not yet before this House will be framed, such as how many members will be on this council. In a spirit of collegiality, I do urge the minister to consider that a council that is equal in size to the existing board of directors could be deeply problematic. It could foster the perception that the Skilled Trades Council is intended to outweigh or equal the board in governance function. So in determining the size of the council, I would urge the minister to, if it's passed as is, to exercise some restraint and discretion in determining the size of the council. The minister, in creating regulations, is going to have to turn his mind to the appointment process. Who's going to be on this council? How are they going to be selected? And I would encourage the minister, as I've already expressed, to ensure that the training of skilled tradespeople at NSCC is not a process over which the perception of patronage or political interference hangs. I would encourage the minister to adhere to open and transparent selection processes. The ABC's process, I think, serves this province for the most part very, very well in selecting highly qualified and clear-cut choices to fill important roles. And I hope the minister gives strong consideration and regulation to adopting that habit here. Term members of councils. I have some experience in as a board member of boards that are concluding or wrapping up. I also have some experience as a member of a board that's just getting underway. I would encourage the minister in considering regulation on terms to stagger those terms length. Initial terms might be, some might be 1, some might be 2 years, so that you in effect create a natural rotation where you're not replacing all of your council members all at once. It provides for continuity and institutional knowledge to remain on the council and support effective transition amongst council members. I would encourage the minister to confer with his colleague at African Nova Scotian Affairs and the Office of Anti-Racism and Equity on meaningful language that would ensure representation on this council from an equity and diversity and inclusion perspective. And I'm not making this simply as a throwaway comment to social justice interests. I've heard the minister acknowledge that one of the challenges faced in recruitment and retention of the skilled trades is underrepresentation of historically excluded groups. I submit to the minister that building into the Skilled Trades Council designated representation for communities that are historically excluded or underrepresented in the trades would serve this council well and bring necessary perspective in the operation and governance of the work of helping graduate in perpetuity a trades workforce that is more reflective and more inclusive. I think it's a very progressive step that he could easily write into the terms of the council and sort of sidestep one of the major landmines that the skilled trades face as a sector in attracting diverse candidates. And finally, qualifications that must be met by council members. I have no doubt that the minister will prioritize candidates with lived experience in leadership in the skilled trades, both as practitioners of a skilled trade, but perhaps also leaders from trade unions that understand the needs of their members and that particular group of skilled trades practitioners. And then in terms of officers of the council and their roles in terms of office, in regulation, I would encourage the minister to with care, consider what you call the members of the council. Again, understanding that in behind this council, you have a standing board of directors at NSCC, a board of governors. I would encourage the minister to be thoughtful about what you call the leaders of the Council on Skilled Trades, such as the board of directors doesn't feel that this new group is a threat to their existence or subsumes in any way their wider authority over the operation of the college. And so I think with those comments, Speaker, I offer my first thoughts in the spirit of helping pass legislation that accomplishes good things for Nova Scotians, demonstrates balance and restraint, but also progressive action that helps build up our province. And with that, I will take my seat. Thank you, Speaker.
I recognize the honourable member for Timberley Prospect.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And a few comments on the bill that's being proposed today that's dealing with a number of different areas within Nova Scotia Community College, including governance and aligning the Department of Labour, Skills and Immigration and the creation of the Institute of Skilled Trades. I guess first thoughts is just why? Like, what is the problem that we're trying to solve with the way that Nova Scotia Community College is functioning, especially with the appointment of the president, and why there needs to be a direct influence from the political body to appoint that person. There is some things in the bill that do appear to be good and some housekeeping, but it does ask the question around why the government wants more control over higher education in the province. We saw last spring with the Universities Accountability and Sustainable Act, which gave the power to government to have more authority over the university boards. And then we've seen the government interfere with Research Nova Scotia, cutting healthcare research funding because it didn't adequately align with the government's economic agenda. So it's a trend that has definitely started in the province, continuing to have more control and say over who's running these types of institutions. That's what an OIC basically enables. So even though it's a cabinet decision, the premier controls that by the actions at cabinet. So why does a political appointment make Nova Scotia Community College stronger? Especially during a time when the college is actually actively recruiting, my understanding, as a new president. So what does that do to the potential qualified candidates that are already underway in that process? Will they remove themselves from consideration? At the very least, it does introduce the risk of politicizing the role. And that's not just to cast aspersions of what is going to happen, but what could happen. That's what legislation does. It enables decisions to be made. So it opens up that vulnerability of this government or future governments. But it is no secret that patronage is becoming quite rampant. It's a discussion every House session that we've had in this House about successive appointments to pretty important positions that are so-called independent. And this session is no different. The reason why that's a challenge is because we expect heads of institutions to actually act in the public interest and be truly independent and not at the whims of the government of the day. And I'm just curious, the minister can explain maybe in this reading why he feels this change is so necessary. We have the college running just fine. As far as I'm concerned, lots of success under the leadership of Don Bureau, who I know is moving on. But obviously the government wants to have a say who that next successor is. And of course, it's important for the college to be responsive to communities and students and adapt to programming that the province needs to grow. But I do believe it works best when it's very connected very closely with communities and guided by educators and industry. So I'm not sure by how making the president a political appointment will make the institution stronger. I challenge that assumption. And I think just because it's publicly funded won't stand up to scrutiny. If that's the case, then why not appoint all your favorite people to be principals of all the schools that are publicly funded? The creation of the Institute of Skilled Trades, that's a good thing. Nova Scotia Community College has been trying for a long time to work very closely with industry, and I know that they are. So to formalize that and have official participation with industry is a great thing. So we see that we need to fill skilled labor shortages across the board for housing, for infrastructure development, for clean energy projects, and many other sectors. So we need more trades. We need more people working in trades in this province. So the creation of that Skilled Trades Institute has potential to elevate training, at least in the importance of the minds of many in the province. So strengthening those partnerships are good. I think that's a good thing. We can certainly support how that can grow real job opportunities. So we support that, but this bill is a bit of a different mixed bag of things. So we're looking forward to what happens at public bills and stakeholders who are affected by this. But we look forward for what Nova Scotians have to say, and I just wanted to register those concerns as we move forward on who the next president is and why that whole process is changing. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
I recognize the honourable member for Halifax Citadel, Sable Island.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I'm really just going to speak quite briefly to this bill. In fact, my first word that I wrote down after reading the bill and thinking about it was, in fact, why. Why this measure? What is expected to be beneficial about this approach? And, you know, how was that determined? How were the options evaluated? And does this compare with what's happening in other jurisdictions? There are obviously some things that are familiar to us in this House, so consolidating the power of ministers. The minister can appoint the board in perpetuity, and creating the risk for conflict of interest and patronage. And I think that's really important. I mean, it's happened time and time again that this government has chosen to dissolve independent boards and vest the power in the minister. So this is no different. I guess I would just implore, as I have implored since 2021, to think about good public policy and why we put things at arm's length, why we create independent boards, why governance is important. And I guess I just really wanted to echo and amplify some of the questions around how diversity will be accomplished in this work. So, you know, we have, and I can table this tomorrow, I've tabled it like 100 times at this point, but there's a 2024 YWCA Halifax report that found over 90% of women and gender diverse people in Nova Scotia skilled trades have experienced sexual and gender-based harassment. 91% of 101 respondents reported experiencing sexual or gender-based harassment, with 82% experiencing it multiple times. Perpetrators in power, harassment frequently comes from supervisors or those in positions of power, making it difficult for victims to report. And there is really a really important analysis in that paper that we should be taking to heart. We want to grow the skilled trades. We want to expand the employment and productivity of traditionally underrepresented groups, you know, and then also thinking about the programs in skilled trades that have been developed around for African Nova Scotians, for Indigenous folks, also persons with disabilities. We have the highest rate of disability in this province, in the country. We need to increase our productivity. We need to increase the workforce. And so my concern is, you know, this is another change on top of a lot of change for NSCC that I think, in fact, I can't quite figure out the path here, because, you know, now has the power to grant degrees, has been moved to a different department. You know, there's been a rationalization of some programs. NSCC responded fast when we needed people to be training ECs and personal care workers, and has been trying to juggle all these balls. So I think fundamentally I don't understand what the advantage is here, why we're doing this, and why we're not simply consolidating the strength and gains that NSCC has to offer.
If I am to recognize the Honourable Minister of Labour, Skills and Immigration, it will be to close debate on second reading. The Honourable Minister of Labour, Skills and Immigration.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I'd like to thank the members, everyone that participated in the feedback. Sincerely, I thank you. You know, NSCC is a great partner. We have great partners in industry. I'm optimistic about growing the skilled workforce of what we need in Nova Scotia. I'll have more to say later as this bill moves along. And again, I'd like to thank the members for the feedback. With that, I move to close debate on Bill 196.
Yeah. Oh, my apologies. Ordered that the bill be referred to, no. Oh, my apologies again. The motion is that second reading on bill number 196, Community Colleges Act. Would all those in favor of the motion please say aye? Aye. Contrary-minded, nay. The motion is carried.
Bill 196, an act to amend Chapter 4 of the Acts of 1995-96, the Community Colleges Act.
Ordered that the bill be referred to Standing Committee on Public Bills. I recognize the Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Would you please call bills for second reading?
Bills for second reading. I recognize the Honourable Government House Leader.
Will you please call Bill number 193, an act respecting energy?
Bill 193, an act respecting energy. I recognize the Honourable Government House Leader.
Madam Speaker, I move second reading of Bill 193, an act respecting energy.
I recognize the Honourable Member for Dartmouth North.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I cannot believe this is happening, that I am going to speak on this bill without hearing anything from the Minister of Energy about what this bill is and what good it's going to do the province, how it's going to rein in Nova Scotia Power, all of the things that Nova Scotians are thinking about right now, we don't get to hear about because the Minister of Energy doesn't want to say anything about the bill. It's shocking to me. Mind you, it is 9:51, so no one's paying attention anyway. Oh yeah, the ministerial assistant is curious to know if the ministerial assistant wants to say anything about it. Certainly gets paid enough to have some opinions on this bill. In any case, I'll talk a little bit about it. First of all, I will say that it's a bit rich that we have this gigantic bill on energy. But nothing in it is going to help us lower power rates for Nova Scotians today or tomorrow or presumably in the next several years. Nova Scotians are paying too much for power. They more and more, increasingly, Madam Speaker, people cannot afford their power bills. Nova Scotia Power has suffered, and by connection, Nova Scotians have suffered a terrible data breach in which Nova Scotians' private information was stolen. And in the meantime, in the wake of that, we have these outrageous estimated bills, which don't make any sense. The whole thing's a mess, Madam Speaker. And this bill, I mean, from what I can gather, because I haven't heard anything about it yet from the government, doesn't really do anything to address that. What I surmise that it does is one of the things it does is sets up the province to collect next to nothing in revenues from offshore wind. So it creates a revenue mechanism for offshore wind to collect royalties, but gives companies a royalty break for 10 years of the first 10 years of operation. That's not going to lower Nova Scotians' power bills. If we're giving the revenues away, if we're not charging royalties on the wind, it's not benefiting us. This will reduce predicted revenue from exporting the province's target of 5 gigawatts of energy from 100 million to 35 million, a 65% revenue decline relative to the previously announced 4% royalty rate. Selling 5 gigawatts of offshore wind power would generate $2.5 billion in total revenues for the province, and the province just wants to retain 35 million of them. Doesn't sound like a good deal for Nova Scotians to me. Another thing that this bill will do will remove the penalties from Nova Scotia Power if it fails to meet renewable energy targets. This means that if Nova Scotia Power fails to meet the 2030 target of 80% renewable energy, it will face no fines or penalties. The bill moves the renewable energy 2030 target obligations from Nova Scotia Power to the IESO. And another thing that this bill does is repeals and replaces the Petroleum Resources Act with the Subsurface Energy Resources Extraction Act. And so now it includes everything from carbon capture to storage to geothermal and fracking. And the department said that nothing is missing from the previous legislation in this change. Madam Speaker, Nova Scotians have been waiting for this government to ensure that they get affordable, reliable power. But so far, the Minister of Energy has not acted to hold the company accountable or protect ratepayers from price hikes. And while this government cuts jobs and programs that Nova Scotians rely on with no plan to get back to balance, The Premier's and the Minister of Energy's whole focus is on pitching Nova Scotians on Wind West, which is a hypothetical energy project that might happen in a decade, or two, or three. The Minister of Energy / the Premier hasn't taken any action to lower power bills or review Nova Scotia Power, but he's already tabling bills to stack the deck for more corporate profits and less money for Nova Scotians. Madam Speaker, Nova Scotia Power burned more coal last year, but rather than ensuring the company provides clean and reliable and affordable energy to Nova Scotians, this government is letting Nova Scotia Power off the hook with no fines or penalties if it doesn't hit its renewable energy targets. And if this Wind West project ever sees the light of day, and I hope it does, by the way, we're going to give a royalty break for the first 10 years of operation on future energy projects, which will reduce the predicted revenue by $65 million a year. Nova Scotians need their energy minister to have their backs instead of using his power to help huge corporations. I just want to talk for a second about our position on Wind West. We support, Madam Speaker, developing an offshore wind industry in Nova Scotia. It's clean and it could be really lucrative. And we believe that the province should learn from the successes of jurisdictions like Denmark, which have managed to create jobs in the wind supply chain, integrate clean energy onto their grid, and deliver public benefits through public and community ownership of the wind power. This province is currently failing to unlock the industry's potential by doing little to guarantee a viable path to market with transmission infrastructure and port investments, failing to have a comprehensive strategy to create jobs in the offshore wind supply chain of component parts like blades and towers, and failing to ensure that Nova Scotians benefit from this project by using revenues from our offshore wealth to lower power bills. The province currently has no strategy to retain public benefits and lower energy bills. If the province had a greater degree of ownership of the offshore wind energy generation and export infrastructure, then we could share the revenues from developing this resource with Nova Scotians and lower power bills. Denmark, for example, Madam Speaker, requires that the public retain a minimum of a 20% equity stake in all wind power developments. Our Nova Scotia, by the way, our Nova Scotia Power Review Act that we discussed today would assess how much revenue the province could gain from offshore wind that's publicly owned through a Crown utility model. About 80% of the jobs that come from wind energy or building wind energy come from the manufacturing its component parts, like blades and towers and turbines. But we have no plan to localize the value-added supply chain of the offshore wind industry, and the Premier's approach will mean that jobs created in Nova Scotia will mostly be temporary and only during the construction phase. And even worse, the Carney government recently imposed a 25% import tariff on all imported wind towers as part of a package of tariffs on steel. So unless the province has a plan to onshore the supply chain for wind towers, these projects will be very expensive. So, Madam Speaker, those are just a few initial thoughts on this bill. It's extremely difficult to assess what, in fact, the vision of this bill is without hearing from the Minister of Energy. I'm deeply disappointed that we're not going to hear from him tonight on this bill. I certainly hope that he will speak in third reading when we pass this massive bill. And I hope he will address some of the concerns that I have brought up here, specifically or especially about the fact that we stand to gain so much from wind energy, and yet there's nothing in this bill that is going to, that's putting down in law, protecting Nova Scotians, making sure that Nova Scotians benefit greatly, and lowering Nova Scotians' power bills. So that's all I'll say for tonight. Look forward to hearing from people at Public Bills.
I recognize the honourable member for Timberley Prospect.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And kind of weird. I don't think I've been seen that before in the last 12 years, that there wasn't any comments from the minister. I know last session the ministers simply introduced the bill, sat down. There was debate on this side of the House, and then the questions asked, and then the ministers said thank you for the questions and sat down and closed debate. But this is a whole new level. Nonetheless, so I think I understand what the government is trying to do and trying to provide some certainty to a sector that they're putting all their chips on to try to save the financial basket case that this province is in right now. The fact that this is called Powering the Economy Act, not the legal term of the legislation, but that they are just saying that this will actually drive all of our economic growth into the future, and that that's all they have, is a clear juxtaposition of what we have been proposing for a long time and actually valuing all sectors of the economy. We have supported renewable energy as much as anyone in this province, and putting forward ways that we can support clean energy for a long time. And we support offshore wind, and that's great. But we need to also support some kind of a vision that looks at innovation in this province and commercialization of research. And yet this government is stripping away opportunities from PhD students to actually do that kind of research. No focus on startups. No focus on scale-ups to get some more large companies, so that we don't just have one Michelin in this province, so that we can look at value-add manufacturing and things like that that can actually grow this economy. Offshore wind could be part of that, and could be part of the energy that we potentially could export. But we've had lots of great stories in this province, and Novonix comes to mind. I talked about it in my government, and how that came from a lot of research from Dalhousie, and the Tesla agreement with battery research. Like, these are the kind of incubators that this government just doesn't value anymore. The opportunities around quantum. I could go on and on and on and on and on, but now it's just about natural resources, raw extraction of natural resources, and a dream that someday we might be able to get multi-billion dollars from the federal government to build a transmission to actually export and export that energy. And how much does the province have in fiscal capacity to participate in such huge dreams now? Do they have billions of dollars that it's required to build that kind of infrastructure? Way more than what was required to import from Newfoundland, Labrador with that link? And why wasn't that started a long time ago? It's really about transmission that we needed. So some of the stuff, the detail in the bill that we got yesterday, the numbers, maybe they're the right balance numbers. We need to strike a balance so that we do get bids. We need to make sure that there is some risk that the private sector is taking on when they're making these bids. I can't comment on the validity of those, if those numbers are the right numbers right now. We supported the work of the IESO. That's great. We need to start looking at ways that we can move forward and have an independent operator looking at how energy is moving around. Those are positive things. But we can't just put all our chips in one big project. And we can't just expect the federal government that already gives us so much revenue all the time to pay for it all. Now, I know there's work happening now. This project wasn't approved yet for a major project from the federal government. There was no real comprehensive feasibility study given to the federal government to give them that opportunity to say yes. And there's an energy announcement tomorrow, so I bet that is probably moving the needle along just a little bit. But we'll see how much fiscal capacity is left in this province to build the ports, to build the infrastructure, to participate in something that is massive. We need that. We need to export that energy. But we also need energy here. And when the wind isn't blowing here, there's opportunities to bring hydro wind from other areas. This is known for a long time. And vice versa. This is bidirectional transmission that has been talked about for a long, long time. And when the reservoirs are low with the hydro in Quebec, they can use our offshore. But it's confusing. I haven't heard certainty on what option is even being taken on where that transmission is going to go. If it's subsea, what part of it's subsea? Is it still the same way through the Atlantic Loop? But we agree we need to attach our grid across Atlantic Canada into central Canada. Yes, we need to do all those things. So what I'm hearing through people that went to briefings is this is providing certainty. Can't wait for regulations. They need it in the bill to show the numbers so that we get bids, so we can rush bids out the door for early this year before any certainty on transmission. And there's an MOU that's signed. We all know how much teeth's in the MOU with New England, that they're going to buy our energy. So let's hope this all comes to fruition. We hope the numbers are right. We hope we get bids this year and that this isn't rushed. And we hope that this government gets their dream of attracting the right kind of bids to start the process and finally see some transmission built, because that transmission is needed not only for export, but we will need energy from other parts of this country. Hydro is still a very cost-effective base load energy that we need. We don't need to subsidize natural gas to distract from this issue. We need to get access to clean, renewable energy, and we need to offer the rest of the country the access that we have, the lifetime opportunity offshore wind. But it's not going to happen in the next 2 years. I can guarantee you that. Just like when this government said, we're going to close coal by 2030. Yes, it was an objective of mine. I was the first one to say it. I didn't put it into law. Who would put it into law before securing the kind of funding that we needed to build that transmission? What leverage do we have now? This isn't just, even the media thought, well, this is a federal obligation. I think I heard the Premier say, well, the Liberals came along and said, we need to get off coal. No, 2021, he rushed in here, he said, by law, we will be off coal by 2030. And then he fought the federal government for the next number of years on carbon pricing. Instead of negotiating, how much funding can we get? How much from the Canadian Infrastructure Bank that had an existing program? Nothing. Didn't want to work. Didn't want to work together with, like, where's Quebec in this situation? I know when I was Premier, they were an issue. We had to talk to Quebec. How are we going to flow this energy in and out of Quebec and sell to the American markets? These are complex issues that many governments have grappled with way before this government. But when we need to start getting moving on it, and we need to find the fiscal capacity to do so, fiscal capacity has been dried up, the political will has been dried up, but we can't just bank it all on this project. So with those few comments, I'll look forward to seeing what the minister has to say as he closes debate. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
I recognize the Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just want to rise and say a few words. I share the confusion of my colleagues as to why we wouldn't hear from the Energy Minister on this signature bill. And I also do want to say that this is clearly enabling legislation, but it does appear to be putting the cart before the horse. My colleague just spoke and has lots of experience in the department as a former minister, as a former premier. This is the new version of the Atlantic Loop. This is something we've been talking about for a really long time. I share the view of my colleagues that if this comes to pass, it's a good thing. We need to find, we need revenue. We need to use what we're good at. We need to find ways to strengthen our national economy. It would be great to be a part of that, but we're not even close to being there. The federal minister for ACOA, a local boy, spoke not long ago, and when he was asked about this, he quickly sort of transitioned to talking about enabling infrastructure. Like, this is a good idea, but we don't have the port capacity. We don't have the lay-by spaces. We don't actually even have the ability to think about building this in our province. And so I guess I want to say that to the extent that this starts to set out that enabling, you know, the way that we're going to be able to do a deal someday in the future, okay. I think that's kind of a neutral. I share my colleagues' concerns about foregoing revenue. I don't know. I haven't seen what I hope is a detailed report from experts in the economics of offshore wind. I don't know if it's a good deal. It doesn't seem like a good deal. I guess we'll see if we get bids and what that looks like. I'd like to see community benefit. I think we're going to have a lot of conversation with our traditional industries. We've seen that with onshore wind. We're certainly going to see that with offshore wind. Those conversations are going to happen. We'd like to see those conversations happening. But I also do want to highlight, while we were supportive of the independent energy systems operator, we also have questions about really who they're ultimately responsible to. So this was the government that came in 2021 and legislated environmental targets. And this government was very proud of that. And like the other guardrails that we've seen this government set, we've sort of blown through those targets. And now, apparently, and this is a question I have for the minister that I hope he'll be able to answer, there's no repercussion for that. So I'm not sure why we would have legislated targets if they're not enforceable, if they have no teeth. And as for the Atlantic Loop, the last thing I'll say is that the premise of this project seems to be that we're going to supply electricity to the United States. And I want to ask the minister if this is what we want to pin our economic future on. When we talk about projects of national interest, you know, the federal government has begun to talk about projects of national interest as a way to strengthen our east to west Canadian economic corridors. How do we stand on our own as a large, sparsely populated country in the shadow of a giant who's pretty mean? I'm not sure why we're putting all of our eggs in the basket of being a supplier to them. I'm not sure that that makes the most sense. And if it does, I would hope that at the very least, we would benefit too. And we, so far, have heard nothing in this plan that would suggest that Nova Scotians would even have the capacity to take advantage of the power generated from this project. So those are some of the questions that we have. I hope that the minister will take the time to answer those questions. And certainly we look forward to hearing from people at Public Bills. Thank you.
I recognize the honourable member for Lunenburg West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I am pleased to stand and have an opportunity to speak to the significant issues of power and our economy, and in particular this proposed act, Powering the Economy Act. I do wish we had had an opportunity to hear the minister speak. It is unusual and unfortunate that that wasn't provided, but we've had the opportunity to have some briefings, early as they were in the morning, and rushed as they may have been. So that's helped to shed some light on what the goals of the Powering the Economy Act are. And so, I mean, you know, powering the economy. I've gone through it with those two lenses. Knowing what I know about Nova Scotians' challenges with power, I hear on the daily, I experience them myself, we all do. Those issues are reliability, affordability, and sustainability, primarily. We have regular power outages. We now know our grid is not adequately maintained to sustain power in times where it's strained, either as a result of weather or overuse. So that's a challenge. The grid is a challenge. We know that we're looking for a long-term sustainable source of energy for Nova Scotia. The cost is a significant issue that is, sorry, Madam Speaker. The cost is a significant issue that is that Nova Scotians are facing daily, and that is in the news on the regular. We've heard from the Premier and the Minister on his position on that. So one would hope to see remedies for all of those challenges in a bill called the Powering the Economy Act. On the economy side of things, I mean, we're facing, you know, a near $2 billion deficit, and deficits projected for the next 4 or 5 years. Nova Scotia needs revenue, so hopeful that this act will provide an opportunity for that, for the sustainability of our future. Nova Scotia can always use better paying jobs. That's a given. And I embrace, certainly folks from Lunenburg West embrace the idea of building new lucrative industry. So those are the things that I was looking for when I reviewed this legislation. I gotta say, I was pretty disappointed not to find much of any of them. I'll just start with a bit of a standalone, and that's the provision on the independent operator. And so the provision in this act actually extends the timeline for the operator to take over the responsibilities and to take over the infrastructure for a number of years. I don't have it at my fingertips, which I mean, that concerns me for a number of reasons. The two primary reasons are the reliability of the grid is something that is an immediate issue, and any delay to that work is going to result in continued outages, continued extended outages, and the problems that creates for Nova Scotians, the costs, the loss of food, the damage to homes. So a delay to that is concerning. I wasn't clear from the briefing why that delay is being built into this act. I would have liked to have heard from the minister on that. Hopefully at some point in the course of the debate we will. But that's very concerning to me. I'm also concerned because that extension is going to come with additional costs. So the transition from moving to the current structure to the new independent operator, you know, that's ticking the price tag up for Nova Scotians, which we can obviously ill afford. So that was disheartening. Then the other issues that I raised, and I think for me the best way to, you know, it's pretty black and white. For me, it's an easy way to look at this is a cost-benefit analysis. So what's proposed in this legislation, what's it going to cost Nova Scotians, and what are we going to get from it? And so, ever the optimist, I'm going to start with the benefits. So the first benefit seems to be the monetary benefit, and we understand that for the first 10 years, if not more, is going to be at most $35 million a year, which, you know, to you and I, to everybody in Nova Scotia, that's a significant amount of money. But as a line item on a provincial budget, that is a drop in the bucket. That, I think, $35 million, I believe just this year, $30 million is going to potential fracking developers. So, you know, that doesn't go very far. So that's not a significant monetary benefit. But I understand sometimes it takes time for industries to get up and running. So presumably the long-term benefit is going to be much more significant to Nova Scotians. So what's the long-term benefit? Well, we've been told that the maximum that we're looking at is about $100 million a year. That's at best, and that is at least 10 years out, if not more. Again, $100 million a year is an incredible amount to you and I, to individuals in Nova Scotia. But as a line item on our budget, it is a drop in the bucket. It is not very much money. It's only a few miles. Well, it's just not a lot. So What about jobs? What about long-term, sustainable, good-paying jobs? There's just no indication of what this will deliver on that front. And it does seem like projects like this do tend to create temporary construction jobs, but the long-term job prospects are not significant. That's what we see, often in Alberta. A lot of the money in Alberta, we know that there's money there, but it's typically for the people working there. It's in the construction of the energy production, not in the production once it's running. So the lack of any projections around long-term good-paying jobs is also quite concerning. But I did put it in the benefit column because presumably it will yield some jobs. The big thing I think Nova Scotians are interested in is the energy for Nova Scotia. I mean, we need sustainable energy sources. We are all working towards reliable green energy. I think we share that commonality and goal. So the great hope here was this would provide Nova Scotians with a significant green energy source. But again, in fact, this is not for Nova Scotia. So what we were advised at the briefing is this is for export. Nova Scotia maybe will see a very little bit of this energy. So I couldn't put that in the benefit column because we're exporting it, not sure to who, potentially to the United States, which I have some concerns about if that's the model that we're going with. But it isn't going to deliver energy for us. It is building an industry. It's building an industry to export to others around the world. So that was what I came up with for benefits. I would have loved to hear the minister talk about what benefits he sees in this act, but we didn't get that chance tonight. So hopefully at some point in debate we will. I really look forward to that. So that's benefits. Let's go now to costs because that's the other side of this equation. There are a few costs here, but it's uncertain the volume or the quantity of them. So the one that I'm going to start with is the one I think that is most concerning to me because it's not just a monetary number. It strikes at the core of our economy and our culture, and that is the potential damage that this project or projects, if it's more than one, could do to our fishery. Our fishery is a $2.5 billion industry, and I'm not even sure that number encompasses all of the spin-off and all of the additional benefits to our economy. It may be our largest industry. It is certainly our most historic and culturally significant industry in Nova Scotia, and it is incredibly important to Lunenburg West and to many, many communities. It's incredibly important to the entire province, but many communities across the province have people who are engaged in it and rely on this industry. And there are significant questions as to the potential damage that these projects could cause to fishing in Nova Scotia waters. And they come in two forms. There's the potential damage to the actual ecosystem that sustains the fishery, and the industry in particular that is raising issues around this that I've heard of is the lobster fishing industry, but I do believe there are concerns for other industries as well. But in addition to ecosystem damage, even if that didn't exist, there will be restrictions on fishing grounds because the wind farms are incompatible with the fishing. So I am entirely unclear. I did not have a sense from the briefings that we received. We haven't heard from the minister. Have we done an analysis on how this is going to impact our $2.5 billion fishing industry for the potential of $100 million a year sometime down the road? That math doesn't work for me. So that's really concerning to me. That's just one of the costs that we'll be facing. I'm curious, there wasn't information in the briefing. We didn't have the opportunity to hear from the minister whether tax credits will be offered to developers associated with this. Those are dollars that just come straight out of Nova Scotians' pocketbooks. So that's an important number to understand. I don't know whether grants might be available for developers. That would be an additional cost. If any of these developers are receiving federal funds, I know that doesn't come out of our provincial budget, but it's still a taxpayer input. So these are costs that are, I would suggest, probably likely to be incurred, but we don't have a sense of them. But they have to be stacked on this side of the equation. And then the other item that we really also haven't heard anything at all about, but I'm incredibly curious about, not only just from this perspective, but from a curiosity's sake, because this is a really big industry, and I don't mean big from money. I mean big physical stuff. The equipment involved in offshore wind farming is equipment that we in Nova Scotia don't have now. I'd be really curious to hear from the minister. Do we have the infrastructure to transport that equipment? How does it get here? Are we going to manufacture it? I don't think we're going to manufacture it. So then we're importing it from somewhere. Do we need to build roads for this? If we do, that price tag goes up fast. So when I weigh that all out, the costs that we've described, the potential risk to the fishery, grants, tax credits, the possible cost of infrastructure, to me, that doesn't it just doesn't justify moving ahead with this without more information, because the benefits aren't there. The benefits just aren't there. The income isn't there, the revenue isn't there for the province, the jobs, we've got no indication that those are going to be there, and there's no energy for us. So it doesn't seem to me, based on what's in this act, and I am a deep supporter of green energy. I want to see Nova Scotia be on the cutting edge of green energy, but we have to do it right and we have to do it smart. And I don't understand, based on what's in this act and the information that's been provided to us, who's benefiting? Because it doesn't seem like our fisheries are going to benefit. It seems like they're at significant risk. The Nova Scotia ratepayer isn't going to benefit because this power is not for us. There's no big financial benefit to the provincial purse. We've heard those numbers, $35 million a year and then maybe $100 million a year after that, 10 years down the road, possibly, hopefully, if everything goes really well. And no real guarantees of good jobs. So I'd like to be optimistic, but in the absence of having heard from the minister on other benefits that potentially I didn't see when I looked through the act, I remain skeptical and filled with questions and concerns. But I very much look forward to more information coming to light through the course of debate on this bill. Power is something needs to be tackled for Nova Scotians. Our economy is something that needs to be tackled for Nova Scotians. I can get behind a plan that could power our economy. This bill, as far as I can tell, doesn't seem to offer either of those things, though, Madam Speaker. Those are all my comments for now, but I absolutely look forward to the minister's comments as debate proceeds.
I recognize the honourable member for Sackville-Cobequid.
Thank you, Speaker. I'm not going to retread ground already covered by previous speakers, but I guess I want to respond to what I believe is a fundamental flaw in this piece of legislation. The Premier and Minister of Energy, in social media posts, interviews, PR events, likes to use words like generational, game-changing, talks about, we have the potential to be a have. And I agree that Nova Scotia has that potential, and I agree with the Premier that offshore wind is a component of realizing that future. I don't make light of that. I think it is a pathway to a prosperity that we have struggled to realize as a province for a very long time. But when I look at this legislation, this enabling legislation, my concern is that it points us in a pathway that fails to ensure the long-term prosperity of the province of Nova Scotia. The Premier keeps talking about Nova Scotia as having the potential to be an energy superpower, not only meeting all of our own power needs, but being able to supply power to neighboring provinces and other customers. And that abundance of electricity being a source of prosperity and driving our economy forward, of powering not just electrical grid growth, but powering economic growth and social development in our province. And those are all things that everybody in the NDP believes very strongly in. Those are goals that we hold very high and work to achieve as well. But I think this legislation positions us more like the energy superpower in Alberta than it does the energy superpower in Norway. Now, for the sake of discussion, Norway and Alberta are both energy superpowers because of oil, not necessarily because of offshore wind. But for the sake of argument, let's look at when Norway and Alberta, what have they done with their energy reserves? The source of it is a whole other thing. Alberta effectively has treated oil, they sort of outsourced the development of that resource to private interests, and they've pumped government money into those industry partners for a very, very long time. As a matter of fact, Canadians, including Nova Scotians, subsidize to the tune of billions of dollars every year corporate interests in oil in Alberta to make Alberta oil profitable and to get it to market. And the return on investment for all that subsidy, Alberta enjoys benefits of it, but they treat that income as kind of a way to prop up the province's spending. And so that's one way to spend the income that comes from, the energy resources of the province. But when we look at Norway, Norway's taken a different approach. Norway has said from the outset, in the 1990s, it said, look, we're going to take the revenue generated from this resource, and we are going to annually set aside a certain amount of the revenue that's generated from this industry, and we're going to put it to use for the present and future citizens of this country. And a quick Google of the Norway Oil Fund will lead you to some very fascinating reading for us as decision makers here in Nova Scotia. Do we want to be like Alberta, or would we rather be like Norway? And we're at a moment in time with offshore wind where we have the time and we have the opportunity to answer that question fulsomely here and now. Norway now, having begun to put aside what at the time was not a record sum, but developing the political and the fiscal discipline to put aside that money in a fund and administer it. Now that fund contains $1.83 trillion in resources. The government of Norway can withdraw no more than 3% of the principal of the fund on an annual basis to support the work of government and provide programs and services. Nonetheless, the sheer enormity of this fund, that 3%, has become a lifeblood to a vibrant social democracy that relies on many of the public services that we in Canada aspire to provide our citizens here at home. And so when I look at this legislation enshrines a revenue mechanism for offshore wind to collect royalties. That's a bad deal for Nova Scotians. Companies that generate power offshore and sell it, get a break on the royalties that they have to pay back to the province. So if we're a company and we want to set up in Nova Scotia's ocean and we want to benefit from the wind and the land and the territory that make it a profitable enterprise to generate electricity offshore of Nova Scotia, I get a 65% discount on the royalties I have to give the province to do that business. And rather than set a paradigm where companies from the very outset that generate power in Nova Scotia pay their fair share, they contribute to a fund that over time grows in size and scope and empowers future governments to meet the needs of Nova Scotians without doing things like running record deficits. The government of Norway, in its wisdom, has turned something very modest into a very formidable fund and a source of revenue to sustain one of the very highest standards of living in the entire world. We look at Norway and quality of life. Life in Nova Scotia is pretty good. Not sure it's as good as it is in Norway. We have an opportunity to set the table and frame a future in which the wealth generated by offshore wind here in Nova Scotia powers the economic prosperity of our province for the rest of time. And when I look at the deal that we enshrine in legislation here, you know, we're going to retain pennies on the dollar in terms of the power that's generated and sold by corporations. It's unclear whether the Premier intends to form a Crown corporation to be the sole producer of energy in Nova Scotia. That's nowhere in this bill. But based on the approach of this government in many other respects, they have a penchant for looking to private industry to be the developer and the deployer of solutions, and those corporations do rather handsomely based on that model. I'm deeply concerned, Speaker, that enshrining this model in law deprives the people of Nova Scotia of a base level of prosperity that enables us to provide all of the services to finally fully fund the finest public schools on the face of the planet. So that when we have a budget shortfall here or there, we have the resources to make sure that those schools don't pay the price. That we have the resources to provide Nova Scotians with access to emergency care in every community in this province, round the clock, calendar, all year round. Again, I don't disagree with the project. There's no question that offshore wind has immense potential to benefit the people of this province, not only in creating a stable, sustainable, reliable, low-cost source of electricity for our own folks, to go from having some of the highest energy costs in the country to having the most affordable energy costs in the country. That's within our grasp if we do this right. But this legislation heads down a pathway that we know leads to less than best for the people that rely on us most. And I think it would be a horrific missed opportunity to get 10 or 15 years down the road, down the wrong path, following the wrong model, and have to fix it later. Why not set ourselves up for the kind of success that really leads the world? We have a model to pattern ourselves after in Norway in terms of public ownership of the utility and the equipment, but also the public benefiting from the revenues generated by companies that produce electricity and benefit from being set in a particular geography. So with that, Madam Speaker, I don't have any interest in recovering territory that other speakers have already trod, but I think this is a point we're sitting with. It's not that this bill isn't worthwhile at all. It's whether or not it's worth passing as currently constituted, and whether we are following the right leads in establishing offshore wind in this province. And this legislation will go a long way to whether or not this is a solution, a solve to the problems that ail our province in terms of electricity and economic prosperity, or whether it will simply continue and perpetuate those issues. Thank you, Speaker.
Is the House ready? Seeing no more speakers, is the House ready for the question? The motion is for second reading. What? That doesn't have to be a motion made. That's why I asked if the House is ready for the question. The motion is for second reading of Bill number 193, Powering the Economy Act. Would all those in favor of the motion please say aye? Aye. Contrary-minded, nay. The motion is carried.
Bill 193, an act respecting energy.
Ordered that this bill be referred to the Standing Committee on Public Bills. I recognize the Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, everyone, for the debate. Just pursuant to Rule 5C, I'm just going to call House hours for tomorrow. House hours for tomorrow will be 11 a.m. till 11:59 p.m. and Friday will be 9 a.m. till 11:59 p.m. Madam Speaker, could you please call private and... Oh, all those in favor? Yeah. I don't need to do her job.
Pursuant to Rule 5C, there has been a request for the for Wednesday, February 26th from 11 a.m. to 11:59 a.m. Thursday. For Friday, February 27th from 9 a.m. to 11:59. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Nay. The motion is carried. Okay. I recognize the Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. On that positive note, would you please call private local bills for second reading?
Private local bills for second reading. I recognize the Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Would you please call Bill 190?
Bill 190, an act to incorporate the trustees of St. Matthew's Church in Halifax, an act to amend and to consolidate the trustees of Fort Massey United Church, St. Andrew's United Church, and St. Matthew's United Church. I recognize the Honourable Member for Halifax Citadel, Sable Island.
Thank you very much, and I'm pleased to stand and talk about this bill, not for super long, don't worry, but perhaps more than the government recently spoke on their energy bill, so here I am. So I think we know these stories amongst churches. As they look, they're changing demographics, the changing needs of their communities. St. Matthew's, Fort Massey, and St. Andrew's churches are all churches, United Churches here on the Peninsula of Halifax. I did a little member statement for them earlier today. They all have been amazing communities, grounded in their community, committed to making their communities better, all affirming congregations as well. And so it's no surprise that as they looked at the cost of their old buildings and their declining attendance and some of those challenges, that one of the things they thought about doing was coming together. And so each congregation undertook its own process. There were votes, and already the community is being built. So there have been joint worships. There have been lunches after those worships so people can get to know each other. And I think I read from the vision earlier today, but I really quite love it. With open arms, open doors, and willing hands, we work together to bring hope, connection, and transformation to Halifax and beyond. And so this bill simply creates the trustee structure behind this amalgamation, and I hope that folks will support it.
If I am to recognize the honourable member for Halifax Citadel, Sable Island, it will be to close third reading on a bill, or second reading, sorry, close. I tried to get you there closer. Second reading on Bill 190. 190. I recognize the honourable member for Halifax Citadel, Sable Island.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move to close second reading of Bill 190.
The motion is for second reading of Bill 190. Would all those in favor of the bill please say aye? Contrary minded, nay. The motion is carried.
Bill 190, an act to amend Chapter 158 of the Acts of 1919, an act to incorporate the trustees of St. Matthew's Church in Halifax, and to consolidate the trustees of Fort Massey United Church, St. Andrew's United Church, and St. Matthew's United Church.
Ordered that this bill goes to private and local bills. I recognize the Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. That concludes government business for today. I move that the House do now rise and meet again February 26th from the hours of 11 a.m. till 11:59 p.m. following daily routine and question period. Government business will include estimates, Resolution 351, Resolution 352, and if time permits, second reading 198, 200, and 201.
The motion is that the House rise to meet again on Thursday, February 26th from the hours of 11 a.m. to 11:59 p.m. Would all those in favor of the motion please say aye? Contrary minded, nay. The motion is carried. We stand adjourned until Thursday.